The cold hum of the transport reverberated through the empty corridors of the orbital prison. Captain Ridge sat silently, his eyes locked on the metallic floor that mirrored the harsh blue glow of the restraints around his wrists. Once, he had worn a commander's insignia, leading his troops with pride. Now, he was just another prisoner, another failure cast aside to the far reaches of Earth, forgotten among the convicts. The door hissed open, and a guard motioned sharply for him to rise. "They're ready for you," the guard said, voice devoid of emotion. Ridge stood, his joints stiff from years of confinement. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had heard rumors of an alien invasion, of desperate measures being taken, but the reality didn't hit until the warden herself visited his cell, her eyes as cold as steel. "Captain Ridge," she had said, "we need soldiers. You have two choices, serve Earth one last time or rot here." Now, as he entered the briefing chamber, the gravity of that choice became all too real. For others waited, like him, bound but with eyes sharp and dangerous. They bore the marks of those discarded by society, but not yet broken. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room, casting a ghostly blue light on their faces. The image of a besieged colony filled the air, burning buildings, alien forces slicing through defenders like paper. "You are Earth's last hope," came the voice of the unseen commander. "Our main forces are tied up elsewhere. This colony holds critical intelligence. If it's lost, so are we in the larger war. You've been selected to defend it." The room was silent except for the hum of the hologram. Ridge scanned the others, killers, hackers, deserters. But then again, so was he. The first to speak was Kale, a woman with cold eyes and a wry smile. "They're sending us?" she scoffed. "Running out of cannon fodder?" "You've been chosen because you have nothing left to lose," the commander's voice replied. "But for each of you, there's still something to gain." The hologram shifted to show their prison records, detailing their crimes. Kale snorted and looked around. "You must be Ridge," she said. "Ex-commander, court-martial for saving civilians instead of completing the mission. Guess your hero days are long over." Ridge remained silent, meeting her gaze without flinching. Then there was Voss, a hulking man covered in scars. He leaned forward, his arms tense, barely restraining the threat of violence. "Sergeant Voss," he grunted, "heavy weapons expert. They say I like the big guns a bit too much. They're right." His smile was more of a snarl. "But if we're going out there, I'm going to enjoy every second." Beside him sat Jax, smaller in stature, but with restless eyes. His silence spoke volumes. A man who had seen too much and had run from it all. His crime, desertion. The last member of the group hadn't said a word. She sat in the corner, arms crossed, a look of deep calculation on her face. Her name tag read Lena, and her record was blank, an enigma. The commander's voice continued, unfazed by the tension. "Your mission is simple. Hold the colony, buy us time. In return, your sentences will be reevaluated. Do your jobs well enough, and you might even walk free." Ridge finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "What kind of resistance are we expecting?" The hologram zoomed in on the alien forces, towering, insect-like creatures swarming the battlefield, their movements fast and fluid, unnaturally so. Ridge's heart sank. These weren't the same enemies he had fought before. This was something far worse. "They're called the Xylara," the commander explained. "Hunters. They're highly efficient, technologically advanced, and they've been tearing through our colonies. But they don't know you. They'll underestimate you. That's your advantage." Kale smirked. "So we're supposed to win because we're so pathetic that even the aliens won't see us coming?" "You're supposed to win because you're skilled," the commander corrected. "Despite everything, each of you is still one of the best Earth has produced." The briefing ended with a final flicker of the hologram. The guards unshackled their restraints, leaving the prisoners rubbing their sore wrists. Ridge surveyed his new squad. There was no camaraderie here, only necessity. But necessity would have to do. He could feel the weight of their fates pressing down on him. Whether they lived or died would depend on his ability to unite them in battle. "We leave in 2 hours," Ridge said firmly. "Whatever you were before doesn't matter now. We're soldiers again, and we're all that stands between them and Earth." Kale snorted but didn't argue. Voss cracked his knuckles, clearly eager for the fight. Jax remained silent, lost in his thoughts. Lena still didn't speak, but gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Ridge turned away, leading the team out of the room. He knew this would be no simple fight. They were walking into hell, but they would do so as soldiers once more. For now, that was enough. The drop ship shuddered as it plunged through the atmosphere, the roar of engines filling the cabin with a deafening hum. Captain Ridge sat at the front, helmet in hand, eyes narrowed in focus as the planet loomed large through the viewport. The tension was palpable. His team sat strapped in behind him, each member lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the sky burned orange, the colony below barely visible through thick clouds of smoke. Kale tapped her fingers impatiently on the armrest. So, how long until we're knee-deep in alien bugs? 5 minutes, came the pilot's voice over the comms. Voss grinned, his fingers flexing over the trigger of the massive plasma cannon strapped to his chest. 5 minutes till we show the Xylara what real soldiers look like. Let's hope they're as unprepared as command thinks, Jax muttered, his voice quiet and introspective. He glanced around nervously. Otherwise, we're all dead. No one's dying today, Ridge said sharply, his tone commanding. He looked back at his team, meeting each of their eyes. Remember why you're here. We hold the line, protect the data, and get out alive. That's it. Lena, still silent, nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the blade holstered at her side. She had been distant since the briefing. Ridge couldn't tell if it was nerves or something else. She was a mystery, but he could tell she was dangerous in her own right. The ship lurched as it began its final descent. Ridge pulled his helmet over his head, the heads-up display flickering to life, revealing a tactical map of the battlefield. The colony spread out below, a scattered maze of buildings, many already in ruins with fires dotting the horizon. Xylara forces swarmed the outskirts, their insectoid forms moving with unsettling precision. The ship's doors opened, revealing the chaotic landscape beyond. Go, go, go! Ridge shouted, launching himself out of his seat and into the open air. His team followed close behind, their boots hitting the ground with heavy thuds. The air was thick with the smell of ash and burning metal. Around them, the Xylara forces swarmed, towering creatures with jagged armored bodies and glowing red eyes, their movements unnervingly fast, like shadows darting across the landscape. Hold the line, Ridge ordered, raising his rifle and firing a burst of energy rounds at the nearest alien. The shot connected, sending the creature crashing to the ground in a twitching heap. Voss was already in the thick of it, his cannon roaring to life as he cut a swath through the alien ranks. His laughter was wild, almost manic, as he reveled in the chaos. Kale moved beside him with deadly precision, her twin pistols spitting plasma with every graceful step. She moved like a dancer in battle, lethal and fluid. Ridge! Jax shouted from behind a pile of debris, ducking just as Xylara's claws sliced through the air above him. We're getting pinned down here. Ridge gritted his teeth and fired another round, watching as the alien in front of him crumpled. Kale, Voss, push up. We need to clear this area. Kale sprinted ahead without hesitation, her pistols blazing, while Voss followed, his cannon blazing hot. The two carved a path forward, leaving a trail of burning wreckage in their wake. The clash of battle roared around them as Ridge, Kale, Voss, Jax, and Lena pressed forward. The once familiar landscape of the colony was now a smoldering wasteland, consumed by the unrelenting advance of the Xylara. Ridge's heart pounded in his chest as he fought to keep the team moving. Each step was a struggle, and every moment seemed to bring new waves of Xylara forces. Kale moved with deadly precision, her pistols spitting plasma in rapid succession. Her face was a mask of intense focus, and her movements were so fluid they seemed almost balletic amid the chaos. Voss, on the other hand, was a hulking figure of raw power. He relished the carnage, his plasma cannon scorching the battlefield as he laughed maniacally. Every shot was a testament to his skill and ferocity. Ridge kept his eyes on the tactical map projected in his helmet's HUD, guiding the team toward the central command structure of the colony, a heavily fortified building that housed the critical intelligence they were sworn to protect. The building loomed ahead, a beacon of relative safety amid the surrounding devastation. "Move up to the perimeter," Ridge barked over the comms. "We need to establish a defensive line before they breach the command center." Kale acknowledged with a curt nod and sprinted ahead, her agility allowing her to weave through the chaos effortlessly. Voss followed closely, his cannon roaring in a relentless rhythm, creating a path of destruction that kept the Xylara at bay. Jax and Lena, meanwhile, fell in a step behind Ridge, their silence a stark contrast to the uproar surrounding them. The group reached the perimeter of the command center, a fortified position surrounded by makeshift barricades and damaged structures. Ridge surveyed the area, noting the strategic points that needed reinforcement. The Xylara were pushing hard, their insectoid forms swarming like a hive of angry wasps. Ridge could see the alien forces trying to flank their position, their advanced technology and brutal efficiency making every move dangerous. Jax set up defensive positions at the west entrance. Ridge ordered, "Lena, get to the east side and reinforce the barricades. Kale, keep an eye on our 6. Voss, you with me? We need to hold this line." Jax and Lena moved quickly to their assigned tasks, disappearing into the smoky haze. Kale positioned herself strategically, her eyes darting across the battlefield, searching for any signs of enemy movement. Voss and Ridge took their places at the front, their combined firepower creating a formidable barrier against the advancing Xylara. Ridge adjusted his aim, firing a series of precise shots that cut down several Xylara attempting to breach their defenses. The creature's chitinous exoskeletons deflected some of the energy blasts, but Ridge's aim was true, and the Xylara fell, one by one. Beside him, Voss's cannon roared with each shot, sending alien bodies flying and creating a growing pile of smoldering wreckage. "We've got to hold this position," Ridge shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of battle. "They're trying to breach the command center from multiple angles." The Xylara forces pressed harder, their coordinated attacks becoming more intense. Ridge could see their tactics evolving, becoming more sophisticated as they adapted to the humans' defenses. The battle was turning into a deadly dance, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. "Kale, how's it looking on our 6? Ridge called out. "Clear for now, but we've got more incoming." Kale's voice crackled through the comms. "They're regrouping and launching a new assault." Ridge's stomach tightened. The Xylara's ability to adapt and regroup was troubling, and he knew they needed to secure their position quickly. He glanced at the tactical map and noticed a weak point in their defenses. If they could hold off the current assault, they might be able to fortify that section and strengthen their position. "Voss, cover me," Ridge commanded, charging toward the weak point. "I'm going to reinforce the barricades." Voss nodded, his cannon blazing a wall of fire that forced the Xylara back. Ridge sprinted to the weak point, using debris and equipment to bolster the barricades. His hands moved quickly, driven by a mix of urgency and determination. Each moment felt like an eternity, but Ridge knew that holding this position was crucial. The sound of Kale's pistols and Voss's cannon continued to roar in the background, creating a rhythm of defense that was both chaotic and precise. Ridge's heart raced as he worked, sweat trickling down his face despite the cold of his suit. Just as he finished reinforcing the barricades, an explosion rocked the area. Ridge was thrown backward, landing hard on the ground. He scrambled to his feet, disoriented but determined. The explosion had created a new breach in their defenses, and the Xylara were pouring through. "Fall back to the command center," Ridge ordered, his voice firm and resolute. "We can't hold them here anymore. We need to regroup and protect the intel at all costs." The team fell back, covering each other as they moved. Ridge fought to keep the Xylara at bay, his rifle and tactical skills tested to their limits. The command center loomed ahead, a symbol of hope amid the chaos. As they reached the command center's fortified doors, Ridge looked back at the battlefield. The once proud colony was now a battleground of destruction and despair. The Xylara were relentless, their advance showing no signs of slowing. Ridge's mind raced with strategies and plans, knowing that their survival depended on their ability to adapt and fight. Inside the command center, Ridge and his team took up defensive positions, preparing for the final stand. The air was thick with tension as the Xylara forces closed in. Ridge's eyes met those of his team members, each of them worn but resolute. "This is it," Ridge said, his voice steady. "We hold this position, protect the intel, and fight until the end. We're all that stands between them and Earth." Kale, Voss, Jax, and Lena nodded in grim agreement. The final assault was imminent, and they would face it together, united in their fight for survival. As the Xylara forces breached the inner defenses and the command center's alarms blared, Ridge tightened his grip on his weapon. The battle for the colony had reached its climax, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The command center was a fortress of steel and concrete, a stark contrast to the devastation that surrounded it. Ridge and his team had managed to fortify their position, but the relentless assault of the Xylara continued to batter the outer defenses. The hum of energy shields and the sound of plasma fire created a constant, nerve-wracking backdrop as they prepared for the final confrontation. Inside the command center, Ridge took a moment to survey their new position. The room was filled with flickering monitors, consoles, and stacks of critical data. The holographic map projected a live feed of the battle outside, showing the Xylara forces closing in on their position. Ridge's heart raced as he looked at the map, trying to gauge their chances. "Status report," Ridge barked, addressing his team. Jax, positioned by one of the consoles, was scanning through the data. "The Xylara are consolidating their forces. They're preparing for a full-scale assault on our position. We got about 15 minutes before they hit us with everything they've got." Kale was crouched by a window, her sharp eyes constantly scanning for any signs of movement. "They're getting organized," she said, her voice steady. "They've deployed more heavy units and are using their aerial drones for reconnaissance. We need to be ready for anything." Voss was at the door, his plasma cannon at the ready. He was grinning despite the grim situation. "Just tell me where to shoot, and I'll give them a show they won't forget." Lena, still a silent enigma, was meticulously checking her equipment, her eyes hidden behind the visor of her helmet. Ridge couldn't quite read her, but there was an intensity about her that spoke of deep resolve. Ridge nodded, taking a deep breath. "We're going to need to hold the line no matter what. The intel we're protecting is critical, and losing it could turn the tide of this war against us. Let's make sure that doesn't happen." The alarms in the command center blared, and the lights dimmed, signaling the imminent arrival of the Xylara forces. Ridge could feel the tension in the air as the team took their positions. The walls of the command center seemed to close in, and every shadow took on a menacing quality. "Prepare for impact," Ridge shouted, his voice cutting through the clamor. "Kale, watch the flanks. Jax, monitor the defense systems and keep an eye on the incoming waves. Voss, hold the main entrance. Lena, you're with me." The sound of the Xylara's assault was deafening. The ground shook as explosions rocked the outer perimeter. Ridge's helmet HUD displayed real-time data of the battle outside, showing the Xylara forces crashing against their defenses with a fury that was both impressive and terrifying. "Here they come," Jax called out, his fingers flying over the controls as he engaged the automated turrets. "They're pushing hard. We're taking heavy casualties on the outer defenses." The door to the command center shuddered under the impact of the Xylara's assault. Ridge could see the towering, insectoid forms of the Xylara soldiers through the reinforced glass. Their chitinous exoskeletons glistened ominously in the dim light, and their glowing red eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness. "Hold the line!" Ridge roared, rallying his team. "Do not let them breach this room." The Xylara forces slammed into the outer barricades, their brute strength overwhelming the initial defenses. Ridge's rifle barked in sharp, controlled bursts, each shot taking down an advancing enemy. Voss's cannon roared beside him, a wall of fire that forced the Xylara back, but only momentarily. Kale was moving with deadly efficiency, her pistols discharging a relentless stream of plasma as she cleared out any Xylara that tried to flank their position. Her eyes never left the battlefield, and she seemed to anticipate the enemy's movements with uncanny precision. Lena, silent and focused, moved with a deadly grace, her blade slicing through any Xylara that came too close. Her movements were fluid and precise, each strike executed with the efficiency of a master. The Xylara pressed harder, their relentless assault pushing the humans to their limits. Ridge could see that their defenses were starting to buckle. He could hear the screams of their automated systems struggling to repel the invaders. "We need to reinforce the barriers," Ridge shouted, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "Kale, Voss, cover me while I fix the barricades." Kale and Voss provided a deadly cover as Ridge rushed to the weakened barriers. He used every ounce of his training and experience to quickly reinforce the defenses, but the Xylara were relentless. Their attacks were coordinated, and they seemed to anticipate every move the humans made. The command center's main door finally gave way under the relentless assault, and the Xylara forces surged into the room. Ridge's heart pounded as he fought to keep them at bay, his rifle blazing a path through the advancing horde. "We can't let them get to the data," Ridge shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Protect the consoles. Don't let them get close." Jax was at the main console, desperately trying to protect the critical data as the Xylara swarmed around him. "There are too many. I'm trying to lock down the systems, but they're overriding the security protocols." Ridge's eyes met Jax's, and he saw the fear in his eyes. "Do what you can. We'll hold them off." The room was a maelstrom of chaos. The Xylara were inside, their alien forms clashing with the humans' desperate resistance. Ridge's team fought with everything they had, each member pushing themselves to the limit. Voss's cannon roared, Kale's pistols blazed, and Lena's blade sliced through the alien ranks with a deadly precision. Despite their best efforts, the Xylara continued to advance, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Ridge could see the data consoles flickering, their screens displaying the urgent status of the battle outside. The final moments of the battle were a blur of fire, noise, and adrenaline. Ridge could feel the strain of the fight taking its toll on him. His movements became slower, his shots less accurate. But he refused to give in. The fate of the colony, and possibly Earth itself, depended on their ability to hold this position. Just as the Xylara forces seemed on the brink of completely overwhelming them, a new wave of reinforcements arrived. Ridge's heart leaped with hope as he saw the familiar shapes of fresh troops storming into the command center. The tide of the battle shifted, and the Xylara forces were pushed back. Ridge took a deep breath, his body aching from the battle. The reinforcements quickly took control of the situation, driving the Xylara back and securing the command center. Ridge's team, though battered and exhausted, had held the line. The command center's alarms finally ceased, and the lights flickered back to their normal brightness. Ridge looked around at his team, each of them weary but victorious. "We did it," Ridge said, his voice hoarse but filled with relief. "The data is safe, and we've repelled the Xylara. For now, Earth is secure." Kale gave a tired nod, her face showing a rare smile of satisfaction. Voss, though exhausted, looked pleased with the outcome. Jax, still at the console, let out a shaky sigh of relief. Lena, as enigmatic as ever, simply nodded, her gaze steady and resolute. Ridge took a moment to reflect on the battle they had fought. They had faced overwhelming odds and come through as a team. It wasn't just a victory, it was a testament to their strength and resilience. As the command center settled into a tense but hopeful quiet, Ridge knew that their fight was far from over. The Xylara were a formidable enemy, and this battle was only one of many to come. But for now, they had survived, and that was enough. "Get some rest," Ridge said to his team, his voice filled with weary determination. "We'll need to regroup and prepare for whatever comes next. But for now, we've earned a moment of peace." With that, Ridge and his team began to recover from the battle, knowing that their fight was far from over, but feeling a renewed sense of purpose and unity. The battle for Earth was just beginning, and they would face whatever came